Hey y'all, everybody's favorite bumpkin here. Well, the radiator hoses that I got on order for Cleetus here, well, they're somewhere between here and here. Hey, what can I say? That's a chance you take sometimes whenever you buy some stuff off of eBay and you know damn good and well it's shipping from overseas. And it's taking a little bit. Hopefully they'll be here in about a week or so. That way we can go ahead and get that done because honestly, I want to get this big bastard back on the road. It's a hell of a lot of fun to ride. But just because we don't have radiator hoses don't mean we ain't got shit that we can do, okay? The clunky, poppy noise in the front end of this thing and that weird feel that it's got whenever you grab a handful of front brakes, that's been getting progressively worse and worse. And, you know, hey, I got time to do it, so might as well get it done. We're going to put some neck bearings in this thing, but also, you guys pay attention, all right? There's a couple things here that's going to be a little bit different than stock because stock, these bikes came with what is called a angular contact bearing. Basically what that is that is a row of individual bearing balls that sits inside of two races, and they're pretty much, for lack of a better term, L-shaped, and they lock into each other like this with the bearing balls in the middle. You got a little bit more overhang on one side than you do the other, and the idea behind it was to be able to handle rolling load along with maintaining lateral load at the same time. In theory, if you're a cubicle nerd or an engineer type, hey, it's a win-win, right? Well, real world, it doesn't exactly work out the way that you think it will. There's nothing wrong with using angular contact bearings in a steering stem, but they do have a couple of shortcomings. Number one, they're a lot more sensitive to adjustment for bearing preload. And number two, they're a lot more needy, kind of like a ex-girlfriend named Becky. Yeah, y'all know the type. What we're doing here is we're going to replace the standard angular contact bearings with a conventional tapered roller bearing. You guys have seen these things. They look just like a wheel bearing in your old grandpa's Chevy truck, okay? They work. They're widely available. And also in this instance, they actually add load surface to the bearing area. That's going to do a couple of things for us, okay? Number one, that's going to increase our service life. Number two, that's going to distribute that load more evenly and spread it out over a larger surface to where it's going to prolong the inevitable to whenever you have to go back in and service and or replace these bearings again. The reason I said pay attention is because these have a different way of setting up than what the original factory fitted bearings have. A lot of your newer-ish metric motorcycles, particularly your sport bikes and your bigger performance touring bikes like, say, Goldwing, Yamaha FJR, the Kawasaki Concourse, pretty much any sport bike that's out there on the market right now, they're all going to use this type of bearing setup. And fortunately enough, the tapered roller bearings, they are a cheaper option, and also they're a time-proven option. Once you put them in there and you set them up right, you're not going to have to fiddle with them near as much as what you do the angular contact bearing. However, the procedure for setting your bearing preload in the service manual is going to be different, all right? This is where you got to take that part of the service manual and just kind of grab it and set it aside, all right? Got to dial back the calendar a little bit and apply a little bit of old school mindset. So let's jump in, okay? Okay, before we jump into this thing and start pulling parts off and flinging tools, let me show you what I'm talking about when I say a tapered roller bearing, okay? The bearing is comprised of basically three parts. You've got the outer race. This is what presses into the frame neck of the bike. And then you've got a combination of the rolling elements and the inner race itself of the bearing. Now, if you take a good hard look, you notice how that thing tapers? Yeah, it goes this way. Well, there's a reason for that. This has a corresponding taper machined into it, and it sets in like so. Yeah, hence the name, tapered roller bearing, okay? Also, it's going to be real hard to see on the camera here, but these individual rolling elements in the bearing, they also have a taper ground to them as well. Everything works together. All those tapers have to match up. The benefit of that is you've got a taper meeting up with a matching taper, meeting up with another matching taper. All those tapers are identical. So it distributes load out over a lot broader surface area, and that translates into a better fit, less wear, and more longevity. Okay, first things first, if you're setting up to do a job like this, if your bike's got a center stand, you're ahead of the curve already. If you don't have a center stand, You got to have a way to hold the bike upright and level, okay? Because let's think about it. We're going to have one end of the motorcycle unbolted for a specific amount of time here throughout the process of doing all this. So if you got a center stand, cool, great, use it. Just a measure of safety here, if you got a concrete floor, let's back up here just a little bit, okay? I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here. Not everybody is fortunate enough to have a motorcycle-specific lift in their garage. I know I wasn't for a long time, so I had to make do, okay? Now, when you get to the old and fat and gray and over the hill stage, like I'm swiftly approaching, things click and pop a little bit more whenever you get out of bed in the morning, okay? This is where a certain amount of creature comfort comes into play. It was worth it to me to spend the money on the lift because I'm not having to bend over and stand on my head and do that crap all the time. At the end of the day, you still got to be able to get the bike upright. You got to be able to strap it down securely to something, and you got to be able to jack one end of the bike up to where you can take the whole damn front end off of it. So if you don't have a lift, here's some food for thought, okay? If you got a concrete floor, go buy a couple of heavy-duty eye bolts and some concrete anchors. Shoot them down into the concrete. That way you can take some tie-down straps and run from your eye bolts that you're putting into the concrete up to an area on the bike, you know, say like the passenger peg bracket, something like that, something that's going to be anchored securely to the frame. If you don't want to do that, or if you're in a situation to where you're renting your place and you don't want to put holes in the concrete floor to keep the landlord off your back, same theory applies here. However, what you can do, go get you a chunk of heavy board, like say 2x12, something like that. Go buy some eye bolts, make your board, say 4 foot long, maybe 5, whatever works for you. Put those eye bolts in there, and then when you park the bike, put the rear wheel in the middle of the board. That way it's anchoring, the weight of the bike is anchoring down the board and keeping it from going anywhere. And then you can run your tie-down straps from your eye bolts in the board up to the bike. The thing is, you've got to make sure that those straps are pulling straight in line. If they're pulling off at an angle, it's going to try to pull the board out from underneath the wheel, okay? Also, it wouldn't be a terrible idea if you're doing something like that, just for safety's sake, pump up the rear brake pedal a couple times, take a bungee cord and loop it around it, and hook it down to something on the frame. That way it's keeping the rear brake applied. That way that rear wheel is not going to be apt to roll and the whole mess roll out from underneath you, okay? Then you can put a jack underneath the oil pan, the exhaust, whatever you got to do, whatever you've got access to. Then you can safely jack the front end of the thing up and not end up wearing the thing for a hat. So I guess the first step that I got to do on this thing is to get this thing naked. I'd planned on doing this earlier in the week, but yeah, well, you know, life happens, things come up. Here we go. Okay, slight sidebar here, and you guys may probably, well, you may not give a damn. But some of you guys may find this kind of interesting / humorous / how in the hell does that even happen anyway? Well, let me give you a heads up on what I got going on right now. A while back, me and the beloved wife unit, we started the process of obtaining our passports because, you know, we got some plans that we've made and we got some shit that we want to go do, you know, now that we've got the ability that we can do that. You know, hey, what can I say? The kids are self-sufficient now. They can feed themselves and they know how to flush a toilet, so they're on their own. We had been looking at this book event that the beloved wife unit had been investigating and researching for the past year or so. And if you guys have heard me mention in the past, the beloved wife unit, actually both of us, we're avid readers. We read a ton. Her more so than me, simply because I ain't got time for it. And also, you know, there's a lot of the shit that I read that I just can't listen to on an audiobook, unfortunately. But, you know, hey, it is what it is. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself here. This book event that we wanted to go to is in London. And we thought, hey, cool, bucket list trip. That's something we've always wanted to do. We wanted to go to London. We wanted to go to Scotland, Ireland, you know, just kind of do the whole dumb touristy thing. Who knows, maybe even stop off and see the Isle of Man one time whenever if all the dates just happen to line up, you know, tick off all the boxes and stuff. So we go and we do the process and we get our pictures taken and we fill out the forms and we open up our lives to the government to where they can, you know, pick through all the pigeon entrails and all that stuff and figure out if we are who we say we are and we're not supposed to be on some kind of a watch list somewhere, right? Okay, cool. Well, a couple of weeks goes by. She gets her passport in the mail. I do not. Now, this is where things get interesting, okay? A lot of you guys know, most of you probably don't, but here it is. I'm adopted. I've never made any bones about it, and I've talked about it openly in the past. Now, that being said, you wouldn't think it would be that big of a deal proving you are who you say you are. Leave it to me to be the odd man out, okay? Because the way my adoption was done way back in the day, shortly after dinosaurs stopped roaming the earth freely, there was a couple on, some game preserves, or so I'm told. I was too young to remember. Where things get sticky with me is way back when, from my point of origin, if you will, i.e. the day I was born on, to the day that my adoption was legally finalized through the Arkansas Department of State, it was in excess of 1 calendar year. 13 days in excess of that calendar year, if you want to get right down to brass tacks about it. The problem is the federal State Department, the WIGs up in Washington, D.C., those guys, they did not want to issue me a passport because the information that I provided to them about my proof of existence was not sufficient. Got it. At this point, we're kind of in a tailspin. And there's been more than one joke made about the house here the past few weeks about me being a resident alien. Now, if that's the case, I'll tell you right now, I want a damn refund on the last 36 years of income taxes. Y'all know who I'm talking to. Is it going to happen? No. Dream on, hooker. It's a nice thought, though. So one thing leads to another. Me and the beloved wife unit sit down and we try to talk about how to get this resolved and what we're going to do about it. I knew that my mom had virtually every vital document that her and my dad ever had stashed away in the football. It's a briefcase. It's kind of like what they keep nuclear launch codes in, only a little bit more low key. Yeah, y'all know what I'm talking about. That's just the way mom and dad did things back then, y'all. Hey, can't fault them. The other day, since she had the rare day off of work, beloved wife unit goes over to my mom's place, and she basically kidnaps my mom for a girls' day out. And during the process of all this, she finds the briefcase, and she digs through, and in this very plain Jane, nondescript, nothing on the outside manila envelope, that is where she stumbled into the Holy Grail. That was the entire paper trail, if you will, about my point of origin and how I came to be who I am now. Either that, or she totally blew the lid off of somebody that was probably the youngest person to ever enter the witness protection program in the history of mankind. Now, y'all know me, okay? I grew up in Arkansas. Don't know what the hell I had on the Clintons back then, but hey, Whip Pro sounds pretty cool. So now that we've got all this stuff, now we've just got to submit all copies of all these documents back to the State Department, and hopefully they will give me this stupid little booklet with a stupid little picture in there with my name next to it that says, yep, that's the guy. That's him right there. It's kind of a surreal feeling whenever you open up an envelope and knowing full well that all the pieces of paper in there is every bit as old as you are, and you start reading through and you start kind of putting together the pieces on, how you came to be and where you came from. It's, yeah, it's kind of weird. Not a bad way, just kind of weird, man. Anyway, I just thought you guys might find that just a wee bit humorous. We got a lot of shit we've been having to deal with, y'all. By the way, the fence, yeah, it looks awesome. Brody the Wondermutt and Shadow the Superdog, they're back out in the yard. They can run and roam and romp and frolic and do whatever it is that dogs do when they're not busy sniffing themselves and, yeah. But on the upside, me and the wife unit are actually sleeping a hell of a lot better at night. And that right there was worth every damn busted knuckle and bruised thumb from whacking it with a damn hammer whenever I was trying to put the fence up, because I can't swing a hammer if somebody's holding a gun to my head, y'all. Yeah. I love my critters. I'm just glad to have them out of the house. Man, pulling the lowers off of this thing made me realize last 1,000 miles, this thing's been shedding bodywork bolts faster than a college sophomore does her sundress after 3 shots of Patron. We're going to have to look at updating that stuff because, losing a bolt here or there, it's something to kind of get worried about, but nothing that's like, oh my God. But whenever you come up with 4 missing, there's something wrong there. Yeah, that little bastard right there. Talk about a buzzkill, man. It's okay. Your time's coming, little buddy. Soon. Soon. All right, now this is what I was talking about jacking the bike up where you can get the front wheel up off the ground. We got our straps back here on the passenger foot peg brackets, and they're going down to the lift, okay? Like I said, if you guys bolt eye bolts into your garage floor, or if you bolt them into a piece of 2x12, you know, big heavy board, do whatever you got to do. But pick you out a spot on the bottom of the bike to where it's solid and you ain't got to worry about damaging anything. If you need to, put a block of wood underneath it, underneath the oil pan or across the frame rails. Now, in this case, the exhaust on this thing is right underneath where I need to be with the jack. But the upside is the exhaust on this bike is more than sturdy enough to carry the weight of the front end of the bike whenever we jack it up and pull the front wheel off. So pipes it is. Now, when you're doing this, the idea is jack it up just enough to where the rear tire makes contact with the lift, garage floor, whatever it is you're using, okay? At that point, stop, because you're wanting the center stand, if you have one, to support it and to help balance the bike side to side and stabilize it. All right, right there, I just got the rear wheel just touching my lift. Now, if you don't have a center stand, no big deal. You're going to jack it up, and you're going to use the rear wheel basically as a pivot point and jack the front end up. But you still want to strap the brake pedal down like I told you about earlier to where you can stabilize it and make sure the back of the bike can't move, okay? Now that we got this thing jacked up, let's go ahead and snug our straps up just to make sure nothing goes anywhere. There. Ain't going nowhere. Bing! You know, since we're pulling the front wheel off of this thing, this would be a prime time to check the balance on the front tire, if I had a machine that can perform such an operation. I know, I got to get my ass in gear, get my tire balancer done, okay? That way I can show you guys what we did and how we did it and how it works, all right? Bear with me. It's coming. Yeah, and just lose it and fling the axle halfway across the shop. Awesome. Now, I know to most of you guys, it may look like I'm just tossing bolts off in an arbitrary direction. Actually, I'm not, and there's a reason for that. Whenever you're taking the front end apart on a bike, don't care what kind of bike it is, what I prefer to do, my area behind the front tire, I make sure I leave that space open, because what I'll do is I'll take brake caliper bolts, axle nut, spacers, whatever. Put them behind the front tire, but put them on the corresponding side of the bike that they go to. If you need something to give you a little bit of separation there, you know, those little cheap and cheesy magnetic parts trays they sell at Harbor Freight for, you know, like $2, something like that, get you one of those. Toss it down there. Better yet, get 2 of them. That way you got one for each side. Another missing screw. Glorious. I need you, and I need you. I don't need you. Yeah, that's gross. On this bike, we got to jack the front end up even higher. Or we can take the fender bolts out. So I believe we're going to take the fender bolts out just because it's an easier option for us right now. Now, slight footnote here, guys. Normally, I would advise you guys to take a bungee cord or something and use that for holding up your brake calipers where they're not dangling by the hoses here like this, banging around into stuff. And normally, that's what I do too. Unfortunately, I have a distinct lack of bungee cords here in the temple right now. I got to remedy that. Now, is not hanging that brake caliper on a bungee cord going to end up tearing your brakes up and make your kids be born ugly? No, it ain't, but still, it's a good habit to get into, and it's a good practice to build. Man. Hey, I forgot. I got them cheap-ass ratchet wrenches that I got off of Temu. Let's try them damn things out and see if they're worth a damn. Yeah, Temu. Now, full disclosure here, this set was like $14 if I remember right. Took about a week to show up. And, you know, they're ratchet wrenches, y'all. How many different ways can you describe this, okay? It's got an opening on this end. It's got a ratchet end, boxed end on this end, okay? It's bendy, it's weebly, and it makes that cool little nifty chink, chink, chink ratchet sound. Now, a couple things I don't like about these. Number one, to reverse them, you got to flip them over. They don't have a reversible lever on them, okay? Number two, the heads of the open end, if you can see that, they're kind of big and chunky, all right? So you're not going to get them in a whole lot of really tight spots. Same for the ratchet here on the boxed end. For what we're doing here, yeah, they're fine. It's just, it's kind of a pain in the nuts having to sit there and go, which way, yeah, that way. That's why I like having the reversible ones. If you're going the wrong way, click, flip the lever. Now you're going the right way. But it's still faster than a plain Jane wrench. Wheel spacer. Wheel, come out of the way. Hang on, guys. Field trip time. Whee! Now, if you notice up here, here's where your brake lines bolt to the front the front of the lower triple tree. You do not have to open up the brake system to be able to do this. Now, this has got to come off of this lower tree because this lower tree is coming out to where we can pull the bearings out and swap them out. All you got to do is just unbolt this brake line splitter from the front of the tree, and then you can take your bungee and set it off to the side. That way you don't have to open the system up, okay? Save yourself some time. Now, granted, if you're due for a brake fluid flush, you know who you are. If you're due for a service like that, by all means, go ahead and do what you got to do to get it out of the way. Make the job quick and easier for you, okay? You got to bleed the brakes anyway. Get it done. Make them happy. Take care of them. Now, in this case, I just did this a month ago. I ain't got any reason to go back in there, okay? So we're going to set that off to the side. That way we can just work around it instead of having to open it up and re-bleed the system again. While we're here and while we got good eyeballs on them, let's go ahead and take these lower fork pinch bolts out. You don't have to take them completely out, but you do have to take them loose enough to where you'll be able to slide the fork tubes down out of the triple tree. Now, I know there's some guys out there that have been like, hey, wait a minute. I've done this before, and I didn't have to take my forks out of the triple tree. I just left them in the lower tree. Good for you, Spanky. But the thing is, this is a hell of a lot easier doing it like that because you don't have to juggle around 50 pounds worth of forks and triple tree all at one time. I mean, if you can do that, hey, more power to you. But it's kind of like putting a diaper on an octopus. So why make more work for yourself? Well, call me Captain Unsmart. There's a nut on the backside of these bolts. They don't thread directly into the triple tree. Okay, we got our lower pinch bolts loose. Let's get the top ones. That way we can get the forks slid down and out of the trees and everything, and then we'll worry about taking loose all the hand controls and stuff upstairs. There's one fork leg. And there we have Fork Legimus Maximus El Deuce. All right, gang, we got the bike back down to the ground where we can work on all the topside stuff. This is where things kind of go slightly left to center. Shh, don't tell anybody. I stole a blankie from the laundry. You'll see why in a minute. The tiger, baby. Hell yeah. Uno momento, por favor. Slight pause to greet beloved wife unit from home from her laborious day at... By the way, Lala, here's your weekly proof of life picture, okay? Look, even got the little guy a new bowl. All right, kids, talking hands time. Now you know why we robbed the blankie, okay? Got to protect your paint. So we're going to pull the top side off of this, pull the handlebars, clip-ons, top yoke, all that stuff. Also, on this one, we got a choice to make here, guys. We can either pull the ignition switch out, which I really don't want to do because ignition switches are held into the top triple tree with a safety screw or an anti-tamper screw of some sort, and usually it requires drilling to remove them, or you can just be really careful and set it off to the side, protect it with some rags. So that's what we're going to do here, okay? The less you got to do, the less you got to put back. Oh, my battery pooped. Let me get a non-poopy battery. Now, you guys may notice these spacers that's underneath the clip-ons here on the handlebars. Somebody put these on here before I got a hold of Cleetus here. I'm not entirely sure if I'm going to reinstall those or not because, yeah, you know. But the good thing is if we leave them out and we decide we want to put them back, that's pretty simple and straightforward. Yeah, that guy right there. Now what we are going to do is we're going to take shop rag here, and then we're going to wrap this up to where it takes all the sharp and pokey spots and keeps it from beating up or painting or plastic here on the inner fairing. We're going to carefully lay this little guy off to the side here, like so. That way he's out of the way. Rinse, lather, and repeat on this side. Now while I'm at it, I'm sure there's some of you guys out there saying, hey, wait a minute, dude, you're fixing to have a bad day. Way ahead of you there, folks. All right, keep in mind, we got the brake calipers off of the rotor on this thing, and now we got the brake master cylinder just laying about here all willy-nilly. That's a funny word, isn't it? Anyway, the main thing is you want to keep the brake caliper from getting pushed out, because depending on your make and model, you could conceivably accidentally push the pistons totally out of the caliper, and that makes for a really bad day. So here's a way around that to safeguard it. Other people, they've even gone as far as to take the brake lever completely off, which you can do, or take a couple shop rags, wad them up into a ball, and then stick it in between the throttle grip and the brake lever, and then just for a little bit of cheap insurance, take a little bit of tape, wrap around it just to hold it in place and keep it from getting knocked out of there, and then you ain't got to worry about inadvertently rebuilding your brake calipers whenever you have an oopsie moment. Okay, gang, sorry about that. Brief pause there while me and the wife unit can catch up after her day at work, and also so we can feast on some candlelight chicken nuggies, courtesy of Wendy's. Good shit. So anyway, we got our crown nut loose here. I already broke it loose there off camera. Honestly, I forgot to turn the video camera on, all right? My bad. But step one, you got to take this crown nut off where you can get that out of your way. And on this one, it's a big chunkus of a damn crown nut that goes on there. Your mileage may vary depending on what your particular model's got. But we're going to set this to the side. And then it is a snug fit, so you're going to have to kind of wiggle and wobble a little bit to where you can get the top triple tree to come up off of the top of the stem. Then take you another shop rag. It ain't got to be a pretty one. It's just got to keep your paint happy. Take that, set it up here. Just do your best to kind of protect your painted parts to where you don't have to worry about scratching anything. Now we're down to the business of it here. Now there's going to be some slight differences depending on your make and model and who built your bike. But in a sense, all bikes to one extent or the other are going to have some type of a locking device that anchors this top steering stem nut and anchors its position as far as bearing preload goes against the top steering stem bearing. In this case, it's just a little washer that's got two ears that locks into that gland nut underneath there. Now if you don't have the proper spanner wrench, which I don't here at the temple, grab something to where you can grab a hold of those notches in that gland nut and be able to turn it by those notches. That's what they're there for. I got to watch out for my windshield and stuff here too. Now this shouldn't be terribly tight because these bearings don't run a whole lot of preload, and the bearings that we're putting in here, they're not going to run a whole lot of preload either. Now they will run a little bit more than what the angular contact bearings did, but still it's not going to be that much. Now at this point, whenever you're taking this upper crown nut loose, always keep your hand on the lower tree, that way it doesn't just fall out the bottom and go splat in the middle of the floor. I'm going to reach down from the top here because I can get to it a little easier. And there you have it. There's the upper crown nut that goes on, and that's what anchors the steering stem bearing itself on the steering stem, and it preloads the bearing stack. Now you want to carefully let that stem come out and down, out through the bottom, and guide it on its way out. Blammo! Triple tree. And hey, looky here. Somebody's already replaced these before with tapered roller bearings. Yeah, tapered roller bearing. Somebody's already swapped these once. Okay, so we got our stem with our bearings and everything out of there. Now we got to get the bearings off the stem. Now the top half, yeah, it's a nice easy slip fit. It's a very close slip fit, but it is a slip fit nonetheless. This bottom bearing, well, guess what, y'all? That thing presses in place. So, yeah, we're going to have to take steps to get that guy off of there. All right, sorry I couldn't bring you guys along with me for all the cussing and racket and everything, but it was loud enough to where it would probably end up bothering some people that are watching the video at home, especially if you guys are wearing earplugs right now, or earbuds rather. Anyway, here's what we got. What I did is, I took an air chisel and put a couple of little strategic bumps on that bearing cage, and I got it popped off of the inner race. Now, that's where things get tricky. The reason I wanted that bearing race and the roller, or the bearing cage and the rollers off of that inner race, I wanted that race in one piece. And there goes the last roller that was just stuck there from the grease. There we go. We got it off in one piece. We didn't have to cut it off, even though there's times you may have to resort to that. If you do, proceed very slowly. Now, the thing is, this is bearing steel, y'all. You ain't going to cut it with a hacksaw. You ain't going to do it with a file, all right? Best bet, get a Dremel tool and one of them little thin cut-off wheels that likes to explode every 12 minutes if you sneeze. Yeah, you know the ones I'm talking about. Buy a stack of them, okay? The trick is, put just a little bit of a slice in this thing at a diagonal angle going across it. That way, you're making a longer cut. The reason I say do that is once you get that cut established to where you're almost all the way through, but not quite, stop there. Because you can take a chisel, put it in that groove, and you give it a couple of whacks, and it'll go ahead and fracture through. Now, when it does, it's going to loosen the death grip that this bearing race has on this steering stem. And you can pull it off nice, clean, and pretty. But don't throw it away just yet, because guess what? You just turn this into an installation tool for pressing your new bearing back down on the stem when it's time to put it back on there. I'll show you how here in just a second. Hang on, guys. We're going for a ride. Whee! I want to show you all this, and hopefully you'll be able to see it. But let me get some of this grease wiped out of this bearing race, and maybe that'll give you a little bit better opportunity to see what I'm talking about. Well, not so much. Looks like I'm going to have to pop that sucker out of there. That way I can get some better light on it and show you all what I want to show you. By the way, you might want to break into your stash of kind of gross but not nasty enough to throw out yet rags. Yeah, you know the ones I'm talking about. The ones you keep in a cardboard box underneath your workbench out in the garage. Because you are going to have grease everywhere by the time you're done with this, okay? Now keep in mind, we're not doing this just to be sloppy. We're doing this to where we can give these new bearings their best chance to live, okay? And it's going to be a little messy. It's going to be a little gooey. If you want to wear gloves, hey, I ain't going to hate on your past judgment. Just be prepared, okay? You're going to have grease every damn where. So right now we got to get the bearing races out of the steering neck in the frame. Piece of round stainless stock that you just happen to have, or if you've actually got a legitimate punch, hey, more power to you. You're working with a higher budget than what I am here. But take this, slide it down in there, and if you look closely, you'll notice that there's a couple of cutout notches in the frame where that bearing race seats. That way you can get a punch on it and you can drive it out. That came out shockingly easy. This other one ain't going to be quite so easy because I got to do it upside down. Ow! Shit! I can't swing a hammer if my life depended on it on a good day, much less upside down and sideways like this. Y'all do not appreciate the pain and agony I put myself through to bring y'all these videos. Come out here. There you go, little shit. Ooh, yeah. All right, let's see if I can get y'all close enough on this lower bearing race to where I can show you the wear in this thing. Okay, gang, bear with me because I'm doing this from behind the camera and it's really kind of awkward if you want to know the truth about it. Let's try to get some focus going on here. Focus. Focus. That may be as good as we're going to get, folks, so let's go ahead and roll with it. If you look right here in the reflection on that bearing race, where the rolling elements ride, see those little stripes that go straight up and down? It's not much more than just a little polished up spot in that bearing race. What that is, that's actually a low spot that is worn into that bearing race from the rollers making contact with it, from basically the forks doing this number and leveraging against the bearings when they're in the frame neck. That, and I'm sure there was probably a wheelie or two involved in a previous life on this thing. And let's be real here. There ain't no gentle way of setting down the front end on a 500 plus pound sport bike when you're doing over 100 miles an hour and you got the front wheel pointing at 12 o'clock. So yeah, they kind of take a beating. Now I know it may not look like a whole hell of a lot, but that little bit of wear, that little bit of a polish, those little worn spots right there, that's what allows the front end to have that pop feeling a little bit, because you're losing just a little bit of bearing preload from the wear. Well, whenever you grab a handful of front brake, physics take place, and here's the stem, here's the neck of the frame. It's trying to do this number. It's trying to flex sideways. So if it's got a chance to move, it's going to move. And typically you're going to see the biggest majority of the wear on the race on the lower bearing, because that's where it carries all the weight. The front bearing's just there to keep it aligned. And this upper bearing that I'm looking at right now, it's got just the faintest hint of a couple of stripes in it. Not much at all. Okay, so we got our old bearings and races and everything out of the frame neck. We can just toss all that shit in the trash, right? Wrong. These are your old races that you just knocked out of the frame. But these are your brand new to you installation tools that were free of charge. I will explain. These are a press fit in the pocket of the frame neck where they press in. That's a given. Now here's the thing. They press in because they're at a specific dimension on the outside diameter. Now if you take your cutoff wheel that you use for cutting a groove in that lower bearing race when you drove it off the steering stem, take each one of these and make one slice completely across one side of it. You're just looking to cut a groove in it. That's all. Cut all the way through. Then go ahead and take you some sandpaper or a file, something like that. Knock the sharp edges off of it. That way you don't get an ouchie in your pitties. But when you go to press your new bearing races into the frame neck, you take this and say you're pressing the top race into the frame neck where the taper faces up. Well, you take your newly minted tool and you point that where it is down, where both of the tapers are facing one another. Reason why, these two edges here are the same dimension, they're the same diameter, and plus they're square to one another. So you're not going to have any misalignment, or you're not going to have the radius from the backside of this bearing that's trying to dig into the edge of your new bearing race. But you can use that to tap it in and get it in nice, straight, and square. Because you cut that little slice out of it, it's going to make it really easy to pop that thing back out of there and get it back out of the way whenever you're done seating the race into the frame neck. Because if you don't cut that little slice in there, guess what? You're going to have to pound that damn thing out too, just like you did the first time. There's no sense in doing it twice. Besides, you can also actually create damage by doing that. Take it easy. Make it easy for yourself. Just go ahead and cut it. You can throw it away when you're done, if it makes you feel better. All right, let's have a discussion about cleanup and prep work here, okay? Remember all those half-icky rags that I told you that you had underneath your workbench? You know, they're there. Grab a couple of them. All the old grease that's in the frame neck, all the old grease that's over on the steering stem, get all that out of there. Wipe it off. You want it to all go away. You want that area to be as clean as possible whenever you go to pressing the new bearing races into the frame neck, and also when you go to press the new race onto the stem itself. Because if you've got trash in there, it's not going to let the bearings seat in there evenly. So you may tighten it up and then think, okay, we're good. And then after you go bouncing down the road for a few miles, things kind of limber up, they loosen up, and boom, all of a sudden you got a bunch of slack in there. That ain't no good. take an extra 5 minutes, clean it up, get it squeaky, okay? Because the more time you take doing your prep work now, the more it's going to pay off on the backside of this. Another thing, whenever it comes to the bearings themselves, your new ones. If you notice these new bearings that I got out of the package here, if you look real close in the package on this one that's still in the plastic, you see how it's got a layer of preservative oil on there? Wash that shit off with some brake cleaner. Let me explain why. That preservative oil that they coat these bearings with, it's meant to be a corrosion inhibitor, nothing more. And the thing is, it's got about the same lubricating qualities as WD-40, which is not a lubricant. Fight me on that, okay? Now here's the thing. The grease that we're going to put in these bearings, when we put them in there, that's the only grease these things are going to see realistically for their entire service life. Now this is why I tell you to wash your bearings off. That preservative oil, not only is it a fairly lightweight oil, it also has a certain amount of solvency to it. And what that will do is that will prevent the grease that you pack these bearings with from actually being able to get in there, coat the rolling elements and the race, and be able to form a barrier in between the two to provide lubrication, i.e. that preservative oil will keep the grease that you're going to put in there from doing its job. So you want to get that shit washed out of there, get it totally clean, totally dry. Spray it with some brake cleaner, spray it down with some brake cleaner, get it good and clean, and just for some double coverage, get you some rubbing alcohol, or if you've got starting fluid handy, because starting fluid's 90% ether, spray it with some starting fluid. If it's not dry after that, then you probably live in Florida with the kind of humidity that we've got right now. So, yeah. What I'm saying is, get them clean, get them dry before you go to packing grease in there. That way the grease can coat and stick and cling and move with the bearing and do its job. Because if you don't get the preservative oil out, the grease is just along for the ride. It ain't doing squat. And by the way, handy little bumpkin tip here. Y'all remember back in high school in science class? Yeah, you know, the one that, you know, most of us slept through and everything because we thought learning was for nerds. But some of us actually paid attention because we thought it was cool. You take your bearing races, you know, the ones that you got to pound into the steering neck. Take your races out of the package. If they're very similar to one another, mark which ones they go to, just to be sure, where you don't put the wrong one in the wrong position. But take them, chunk them in the freezer. Best bet, put them in a Ziploc bag after you wash them and get them dry, then toss them in the freezer. Let them sit and chill in the freezer for, 45 minutes, an hour, something like that. Cooling that bearing race down, it will actually contract ever so slightly, but it does make it a whole lot easier whenever you've got to take a hammer and tap those things back in place in the headstock of the frame. That way you can make sure you get them seated square and true, and also you're not having to beat the crap out of them at the same time. Coincidentally, on the flip side of the spectrum, the bearing that's going on the steering stem, the lower bearing, if you've got a hot plate, wow, hot plate, I'm showing my roots here. And yeah, I've got a hot plate or 3. Anyway, take this little guy, get you some gloves so you don't burn the pitties, put this on a hot plate on medium, and let him sit there and cook and get warm. Probably 15, 20 minutes, just something to get it good and evenly heated. And then at that time, you will all but be able to take this and drop it in place on the steering stem, because this will expand. If you want to really give it the double whammy, while you're letting this heat up on the hot plate, chunk the steering stem in the freezer. Just make sure mama doesn't catch you, or else you're going to you're going to wind up with a pop knot on your head, and then the kids are going to look at you like, why did you violate our popsicles like that? We don't understand. They'll get used to it. Well, golly, it just dawned on me. Both of these bearings in this conversion kit that replaces the original angular contact bearings here in Cleetus, these are the same part number bearing. So it doesn't matter which way I put them. But 99% of the time, your bottom bearing is going to be bigger than your top one. So pay attention, y'all. Hey, gang. Next day, same bumpkin, different t-shirt. Picking up where we left off last night, here working on Big Zed with the steering stem bearings, I got to put a pin in this right now, and let me take a moment to explain to you guys why, okay? Now, please bear with me in this. All you guys that have been watching the channel from the jump, y'all know that we had to deal with a bunch of stuff from Hurricane Milton, okay? had some damage here at the hacienda, and also basically our life got turned upside down and we got shook up a bit. And we're still dealing with that stuff. We got the fence out here in the backyard. We got the dogs out of the house. Hey, great, cool. That's awesome. That's a step. The next step is we have to do some stuff here to where we can meet in the middle, so to speak, with the powers that be to get this resolved and get it put to bed. I don't want to go into specifics there. However, you guys use your own imagination, okay? Draw your own conclusion. Moving forward from that, what that means for us here at Joe the Mountain Jedi and here at the Jedi Temple, we're going to be breaking this episode up into two pieces, okay? Number one, that's because I didn't want this thing to turn into an hour-and-a-half long extravaganza for you guys, and I don't want to draw it out like that and you guys end up getting lost in the sauce, so to speak, from how long this video could potentially carry on. Number two, it's that unfortunate adult stuff that we've got to deal with on the daily. And we just got a whole lot more dumped on us on top of an already fairly hectic workload as it is. Two things. Keep the coffee pot on boil, cross your fingers. We just got to put our head down and we just got to hump up and get it done. So please understand, I'm not trying to dip out on you guys, and I absolutely hate leaving you guys on a cliffhanger, so to speak. I got to step this aside for just a little bit because I got grown-up shit that I got to deal with, okay? Now, in the meantime, whenever I can and whenever time and life allows, we're going to be throwing up a whole lot more shorts here on the YouTubes, but also I'm going to be pushing a lot of small stuff over onto the Patreon side, okay? Now, on the Patreon site, just to give y'all a heads up, if you're not aware or if this is the first time that y'all have visited with us here, my Patreon site is 100% absolutely free. There are paid options for people that opt to support the cause here at JTMJ. However, there is nothing hid behind a paywall, so to speak. Knowledge is power, and knowledge is free. Knowledge that isn't shared, that knowledge is gone forever, and we don't buy into that shit here. If you like what we do here and you like what we've seen, check out some of the other videos. Hey, what can I say? Use it as a holdover until we get back into the normal swing of things here. Hopefully it'll just be a week or two, all right? Crossing my fingers. But in the meantime, be sure to check us out on the Patreon because we're going to have a lot more stuff popping up over there, little bits and pieces here and there, little tiny info bits, tech tips, stuff like that, the normal day-to-day stuff that we go through at the Ride Factory on the regular. And also, that is also where you gain access to the Joe the Mountain Jedi Discord. That's where we're building our brain trust. It's the brain soup, okay? It's the gray matter stew where we all come together, we bounce ideas off of one another, and we all learn from one another. If you got a problem you can't figure out, hey, hit us up over there. Me, one of the other folks that's over there, they're going to jump in there and they're going to help you out. The reason why we do that is because this makes a better community for all of us, okay? It enriches all of us, and also, the more that you are aware of what's going on with your motorcycle, at least from a mechanical standpoint, the safer you're going to be as a rider, and the better prepared you're going to be when you go out into the big bad world, or if you're on a long road trip or something like that. The main thing is, it allows you to be more self-sufficient and self-reliant. The more you know, okay? So until next time, guys, I love you, and I hate like hell that I'm having to cut this short, but I will catch you on the flip side, and we'll be back real damn soon, all right?
Force will be with you, always.